Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy247 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast.
Welcome into another episode of Vandy247 Live on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick. We are talking a lot of basketball today, and as you know, that's always brought to you by The Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the laundry professionals at The Wash House take care of that for you. They've got 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area. Just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry, ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. All right, today we're talking about last night's Vanderbilt-Alabama game. Obviously, the Crimson Tide beat Vanderbilt 103-87. Supposed to have Luke Wyatt on today. Not seeing him in the StreamYard room right now, so this might be a quicker episode. Me just rumbling through a lot of these mailbag questions that you guys put up yesterday. And if Luke comes in, of course, I will bring Luke in here. But Vanderbilt loses last night. Of course, Joey and I talked a lot about it. I'm not really going to rehash a ton of that. Not really a surprise. I don't think last night's result was any sort of huge surprise. But, you know, then again, I do think there are some things Vanderbilt can look at in this game, because I told Joey this last night, you know, you're going to play more teams like this in the SEC. Kentucky plays a lot like this. You know, you've got Texas as a team that scores a lot. You know, even Oklahoma, like these teams score. You know, Tennessee, I think that they matched up with Tennessee well, and we talked about that. But, you know, after this Alabama game, I think if you're Byington, you've got to rethink some things in terms of, number one, putting more points on the board. I know they scored 87, but also defensively, you're going to be playing against a lot more length here down the stretch here. So Saturday against Kentucky, 1:30 tip-off there on the SEC, not SEC Network, actually. They've been playing on the SEC Network. That's actually on ESPN on Saturday. My apologies. So ESPN at 1:30 at Memorial Gym. So we'll talk all about that throughout the rest of this week. Connor on YouTube. Morning, Connor. What are your thoughts on Magnon? Love the physicality and desire to win, but the foul trouble continues. The foul trouble does continue. I think you can live with, you know, maybe a couple of first half fouls and a foul or two late in the game. But like last night, you know, he fouled out with, I don't know how much time left. There was still a good bit of time left in that game. And even against Tennessee, picked up his 4th in a big spot in that game, if I'm not mistaken. So his play style is exactly what they need in the SEC. You know, he's not much of an offensive threat. Everybody knows that. It's well documented. But yeah, the fouls for him, they've got to be eliminated. So that, you know, if you're Mark Byington, you gotta live with a little bit of what you're getting from these guys, whether it's Magnon or even some of the Hogard turnovers. You know, he's so creative there that you know, you can live with a lot of those and play to the next play. Speaking of playing to the next play, we're gonna roll in with Luke Wyatt right here on Vandy247 Live. Luke, you're back.
I'm back. It's great to be back around the round table. I missed you guys. It's been a rough 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, you feeling much better?
Yeah, I am. It was. I got it at the bowl. I'd gone to a pregame party, and I'm sure I picked up the flu there. And then sitting out in that weather didn't help. So it kind of almost went to pneumonia. So it was a rough 2.5 weeks. Don't remember a lot about it.
Well, glad you're back here with us and back in the saddle here. Chris unable to join today, but we do have a good bit of mailbag questions. I want to get your take first, Luke, on this basketball team. I think that's what a lot of people want your take on here in the last 2-3 weeks. You haven't been with us. Obviously, 3-3 in the SEC, and big win on Saturday. Of course, I would assume you weren't able to make it, but definitely watched it.
I was there.
You were there. Okay, so to just tell me about what you've seen from this team, and especially that win on Saturday, which I don't know that a ton of people expected.
No, I tell you what, I'm probably more pleased about than anything is, we talk. Our concern at the beginning was always our size and our height and or lack thereof. And then when you have Kajani Wright go down, you got two guys that are 6'7", maybe 6'8", and that's it in the post. And they did a magnificent job carving out space against a Tennessee team who had a couple of 7-footers. And now I think jumping around a little bit here, last night that was an issue. We missed a lot of bunnies inside, and Alabama's height and depth was better than Tennessee's, I felt like. But the Tennessee game, to get that win, when you looked at the schedule, and we as fans or reporters can say this, we can look at 6 or 7 down the road and say, wow, this really looks daunting. But, if you take it one at a time like they did against Tennessee, and I think they did last night too, this team can do some things. Coach Byington alluded to it in his post game with the kids, where he shared it with everyone, and said, you guys are this close to being onto something, but you got to keep working. And I felt like the Tennessee game was a great boost. They had to get one of these three. You're playing the number 6, the number 4, and the number 8 team in the country back to back to back. It's a tough deal, but I'm excited about the way they're playing, how hard they're playing. I know last night didn't go well. I thought the second half we were much better offensively. But this team is exciting. We have a chance against Kentucky. They're a lot like Alabama offensively, so it'll be tough. I think they even may have a couple of better outside shooters than Alabama does. But if we keep playing the way we're playing, we got to get to 5 more, in my opinion, to get to the tournament. If we win 5 of the next 12, we'll be dancing.
Yeah, and that Tennessee game, I mean, talk about the atmosphere. I thought that was a huge part of that win. The students showed up, and I know we've got some questions about this in the mailbag, but I know for you, look, that had to be good. And I wasn't sure if you were there, but obviously with you being there, that had to feel good to hear it like that, to see it like that, and that was back for at least one more Saturday. Hopefully you see that again on Saturday against Kentucky. But I certainly haven't seen that. I go back to 2012, maybe. I mean, like that, capacity crowd and 50%, maybe even a little bit more were Vandy fans.
Yeah, I want to clear something up for everyone. This will help everybody. We always kind of guess at crowds. Well, I've done my research, and I've gotten how many seats there are in the 4 quadrants of the gym. That side where the students are on is all bleachers except for a couple of rows of seats. In fact, my seats are in those couple of rows. That side seats 5,000 people. That was pretty much all Vanderbilt. Then you have the what we used to call the Bell Mead section, across from us. That's about 3,200 seats. Each end zone's 3,000. I'm talking from the lower level all the way to the third level. So if you estimate that, it was probably 8,000 Vanderbilt, 6,300 Tennessee. That's basically because you can kind of look, and with their color, you can obviously see who the Tennessee fans are.
Yeah, and that's why and early Tennessee fans always get there early too.
Sure.
And so right away you're like, uh-oh. But right. It's the crowd settled in, and late in the game they got loud, and after that, I mean, that Edwards spurt, after that second Edwards 3, I mean, there were some roars that obviously you didn't hear last year. No. And you really haven't heard it. Like, you haven't even seen the gym. I go back to Auburn under Jerry Stackhouse, but I think Auburn that night, a couple of years ago, Luke, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Even Auburn that night, I think there are more Auburn fans.
Yeah.
And so this was different, and you can tell that Mark Byington has more fans bought in. And you can tell that, you can tell there's investment from these fans too, right? I mean, there's probably new donors that paid for for NIL money and things of that nature, and they want to come to the gym and see Vanderbilt play, and I'm sure Tennessee fans in the building were sitting here going, my goodness, they've got a coach. And I definitely heard from some that wishing that Jerry Stackhouse was was still there. But just good to see, Luke, and I know you appreciated that. But in Saturday, I don't think will be much different. Kentucky, I'm sure, will travel well. I'll be interested to see if it looks like there's more blue. But Saturday shouldn't be a whole lot different.
I'm thinking Saturday would be maybe a little more blue than it was orange, simply because it's a Saturday game at 1:30, and somehow Kentucky fans, I mean, you can watch them when they play at South Carolina. They go everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know when they work or if they do work, but you're correct. It'll be another great atmosphere. I tell you what, I want to give credit. We're quick to criticize, and I'm probably I'm openly critical of some things that go on over there. But whatever they've done to get more students for football and basketball, now I know winning has a lot to do with it and the product, but man, it just seems like there's about 500 to 700 more students coming to events, especially men's basketball and football. And I'm happy to see that, because they make a lot more noise than the other 4,000 or 5,000 Vandy fans that are there.
They do. And I shared this piece on Twitter from somebody with the Hustler, and I want to make sure I say his name. It's a really good piece. And the headline read that sports culture at Vanderbilt will not go back to how it was before that fateful Alabama win. And it's a really good piece, and I'll even send it to you,
Please,
Luke.
do.
It's from the student's perspective, and they talk about how a lot of it started that Virginia Tech game, but that wasn't jam-packed. That was a good student crowd, and then Alabama, Texas crowd. The student capacity at the football stadium this year was phenomenal. And then you roll into basketball. I think it's credit to the administration, but also that football team. And the students wanting to be a part of something. Students want to storm courts. They want to storm fields. Barton Simmons tweeted, "Come to Vandy, storm courts and fields on the weekends." I mean, and that's kind of how it's almost how you think of Vanderbilt if you're just a general sports fan. Man, they've had some fun in the last year or so, and I know we'll have time to talk about that, Luke. But we talked a little bit about that on Saturday. When's the last time you felt like this about Vanderbilt athletics?
Yeah,
I mean, it's been a long time.
Well, there was basically a 7-year lull with men's and women's basketball and football, and 7 years is not a long time in the whole scheme of things. But when you're not winning much at all, and there was very few highlights during that time for all three sports. Baseball kind of carried the banner, and everything else was just kind of an afterthought. You just waited till baseball season, but that has changed, and hopefully changed for in a permanent way.
I want to get to a football note real quick. We have it, like I said, it's been almost a month since we've had you on. I know you usually try to talk to Coach after the season. I'm not sure if you have, but just how are you feeling right now about this football program? I know, this spring portal window, more players will be brought in. That's, we saw a lot of that last year on this team. Heck, I think Pavia was brought in around this time last year. What do you expect in this window, Luke? What do you think some more of their needs are? And, just how are you feeling about kind of the portal as a whole for Vanderbilt heading into year 2 of Pavia, Kill, and Beck?
Well, I'll say this. I've seen some comments on the board about, we can win 9-10 games next year. I want everybody to kind of cool their heels about that, because we're going to have that same schedule. You're just flipping the home teams for the road teams. So it's the same thing, and except for a couple of non-conference teams are different. So it's going to be tough to get to 9 wins no matter what happens. But I feel like we've still got to get maybe another alignment or so, offensive lineman, I mean. I feel good about what we have coming back defensively. I think we filled some gaps there. Of course, losing a guy like C.J. Taylor and Derrick Wright is going to be tough. But I'm excited about what we'll have at corner. And that's the first time going at this time of year that I'm able to say we may actually have 4 corners that we can put out on the field and feel pretty good about. It was always 1, maybe 2 guys, and that was it. And we got burned a lot. But I'm over the moon with what can happen. I'll be glad when we get Tennessee's football schedule.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, and that's a good point about the road. The ones you got at home this year, now you got to go on the road and play them. You got to go to Tuscaloosa, got to go to Texas. The home games are, looking at them, they're manageable. I know we'll have plenty of time to talk about that schedule, and I know we've got a few football questions in the mailbag, but let's go ahead and roll into that, Luke. It's brought to you by Sutherland and Belk, family-owned injury law firm. They are sponsoring the chat room and today's mailbag. Also, fire away comments and questions if you've got them for Luke. If you or a loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give Taylor Russell a call at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. Our guest line with Mr. Luke Wyatt is brought to you by John Levin, good friend of the show, Womble Bond Dickinson. His company thanks to student athletes at Vanderbilt for their dedication, effort, and hard work. It's also brought to you by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-line packaging automation. All right, first one, Vandy fan 615. How do you guys think a Vandy team that goes 8-10 or 7-11 in conference will be compared to other bubble teams from weaker conferences like the ACC? Well, Luke, I think because you're in the SEC at Vanderbilt, you finish with 7 wins, depending on who you beat, you'll be on that bubble. You get to 8, you're probably in the tournament. I think they'll be compared heavily. Look at the SEC right now.
Yeah. No, I think, and I just mentioned a while ago, 8 wins is what we're going to get to. 5 more wins in the regular season, I think, gets us in the tournament. That's 20-11 heading into the SEC tournament. I know last year it didn't weigh. I noticed the postseason tournaments, it didn't weigh much. So if we're only got 7, let's say we only get 4 more wins, you'd have to have a deep run, I think, in the SEC tournament maybe to get in. So it's very important to go ahead and get that 5th win out of the way and be 8-10 at very least when you're heading into the tournament. And with the schedule we have, it's not going to be easy to get 5 more, but we can do it for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't feel, as daunting. Like if they were only at 1 win right now in conference,
right?
Or that's a hole, right? That they've set themselves up for a chance right now, and obviously that Tennessee win did a ton. From Steve VU98, what would our net look like if we went 7-11? Well, their net right now is at 37, and I'm not a net guy. Chris is a better numbers guy. This is where we throw it to. This is where we throw it to Chris. But I don't know, Luke. I mean, you get to 7. That means 4 more wins over SEC teams. I would imagine you're around that 30 in the net. I don't know, but right now they're 37th in the net, and I don't think if you would have told me that before the season, I probably wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah, I noticed that. I follow Ken Palm a little bit, and they're 48 still moving it. As long as they stay in the 30 to 40 range, they should be in good shape. And I feel like that's what, if you get to 8 wins, we'll be in the top 20 in the net, I think.
From Steve, also, does the net include an adjustment for biased officiating?
Well, when you go on the road in the SEC, most of the time, it's funny. And if you don't mind, Billy, I want to kind of go off on a little something here that people should notice. Yeah. Saturday, let's just take the Tennessee game. We were up 16. I think their biggest lead was 8 early in the game, 19-11. And I always watch fouls. Now, I know it's kind of silly to say because if you're not moving your feet, you're not playing defense, you're going to get more fouls, obviously. But in the first half, at one point it was 7-2. Tennessee had 7 fouls. We had 2, which is usually what you get on the road. Second half, Tennessee committed 2 fouls in the first 17 minutes of play. As cool as that team is, they were only called for 2 fouls. Why that happens, I don't know. Whether it's coincidence, whether we're taking more perimeter shots, I don't know. But if you go back and watch the tape of the entire game, which I've watched it twice now, the game's officiated totally different in the second half than it was the first. I don't know if those guys get in there at halftime and say, hey, look, We got to even up the fouls. Surely to goodness that doesn't happen. If it does, it's silly.
Well, and Rick Barnes actually talked about it after the game. He, he was actually defending a lot of these officials. He said he sees NCAA tournament benefit because he said they're starting to be more like they're starting to referee the games more like the NCAA tournament games. But you're still seeing like last night, I think it was 9 fouls called in the first 4 minutes.
Yeah.
To me, there's too many being called. But yeah, I mean, you get to half. I don't know what those refs are talking about, but
I guess it's Billy, the inconsistency. When you're out top, let's say you're defending off of a ball screen and you bump a guy slightly, they'll call a foul. But if you're underneath, you could take your arm, throw it in guy's chest, run over him, and they don't call anything. So I don't know, parts of the floor are called differently than other parts of the floor. And to me, a foul's a foul. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Sears last night, I think it was Magnon's 5th. I don't know if you were still watching. Well, yeah. Magnon, because it looked like a foul right away, but they showed the replay and Sears just lost his balance. And so a lot of those are called. And Vandy does it too, but it really does go both ways. I don't think the officiating has been overly awful. Now Nate Oates, he wasn't happy at times, and even Coach Byington wasn't happy at times. But you get into these physical SEC slugfests. I don't envy these officials. I mean, in these slugfests here. Let's see here from cousin CJ. We referenced this earlier. Student attendance has increased for football and basketball this year tremendously. Will that same energy carry over to baseball? Our home atmosphere is not great compared to other SEC schools. I think that's a good question, Luke. There hasn't been a student presence at baseball games. I know there's one section in the outfield for them, but I don't know why. It's a football and basketball culture. I think if you're a student at the SEC school, unless Ole Miss has a great student section for baseball, to Tennessee students, you saw that first base line, section travel. I don't know. I don't know if it carries over, maybe a little bit, but the Hawkins Field is not the most daunting atmosphere. Even when Vanderbilt was dominating even more and winning more games.
Well, my wife and I sit above the third base dugout about midway. And we have some students that are around us, the lacrosse team, the swimming team, soccer. Some of those girls come to games. I see some football players at games. But here's what happens in baseball. Because of the type of game baseball is, they'll come and stay for 2 or 3 innings and they're gone. Yeah. It's not a basketball game or football game where they come and they're there for the entire thing. It's kind of more of a social thing. And I don't know why that is. I guess it's the game. But anyway, I do see a lot of students, but they don't group together and get excited about the game.
Yeah. Well, Ole Miss, they've got the beer showers in right field. That's why the students are there. I mean, let's face it. They've got a good baseball program, but, there's not really anything at Hawkins Field for students. I know there's the beer garden in left field, but it is kind of tightly packed in. I do wonder if with this new renovation, there could be some more student offerings that could be interesting. But for baseball, you're right. There's got to be an outside reason, social type reason to go show up.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get all these basketball questions from Pessimistic Door. Games like Alabama and Missouri in basketball, the team needs a second consistent scorer to go with Edwards. Right now, they have 3 guys who average 10 to 11 points, Hogard, Nickel, and McLaughlin. Who do you think will step up to get closer to 13 to 15 points a game? And if not, why? It's a good question.
My take on that would be that if you had to point out one, it would be Tyler Nickel, just because he has the ability to do what he did last night and get streaky and hit 3 or 4 threes in a row. So to me, it's Tyler Nickel, but it's going to be someone different. I think it's going to be someone different just about every night, because there's not a lot of difference in those kids offensively. You know, we play 9 guys. Tyler Tanner is just scraping the surface on what he can do offensively. I think he's going to have a breakout game at some point this year and score 15 or 20. Grant Huffman is just basically a defender. He's not a big scorer. Chris Magnon, again, a beast on defense, but doesn't score a whole lot. But of the other guys, it's going to be someone different, I think, most of the time.
Let's see here. What basketball players, from Steve again, will move on after this year, and what positions do we expect to add for next year, portal or high school? Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Hogard is definitely gone. And then you can go ahead while I pull up this roster, Luke.
I don't know if he can get another year since he hasn't played this year, but I think he's gone. Magnon is gone. And there's one other, Huffman.
Huffman, yep.
And that's the graduate students. Now, if there's something in there where they can somehow get another year, I'm sure they'd come back. I don't know about Hogard, but I think the other ones would come back. I just feel like he's going to continue to recruit like he is. Where guys, you know, when you announce the entire team as point guards, that's his philosophy. Now, does he want some more length and height? Absolutely. He's going to try to get a couple of those guys. But I think you'll see 2 or 3 more portal guys. Coach Byington mentioned, Billy, in a I don't know if it was something you guys may have been at when you guys were talking to him about in the future how he wants to construct a team. And he said it'd be much better to only have to get 3 guys every year than to have to do what he did this year. But it's amazing what he's done. I do want to give him his flowers right now. To take a team and put 11 new guys out there and 9 guys that are all brand new, and to have them already be at 15-4, you can say whatever you want to say about the non-conference schedule. That's one heck of a job.
Absolutely. And, you know, I would say positionally, you know, they'll bring in another 5-man, you know, from the portal, I would imagine. Yeah, I know Kajani Wright, you would assume, comes back healthy next year, but, you know, you really never know. I mean, you don't know for sure. So definitely a 5-man with Hogard likely leaving, you know, another point guard, and Huffman too. I mean, those 2 guys run point. Technically everybody runs point, but those 2 guys bring it up a lot, of course. Tanner, I would imagine, is your point guard. I mean, you know, I say that this Byington system, you know, Hogard, Huffman, and Tanner, they bring it up. All 3 of those guys bring it up the floor. Even Edwards brings up the floor every now and then. Same thing with McLaughlin. So positionally, just athletes. I know the Jalen Dean Vines kid is definitely an athlete. I would say that. You know, you look at that guy last night, Mo Diabate, Luke.
Oh,
I mean, you know, Vanderbilt doesn't have a guy like him, and Vanderbilt didn't have a guy that could guard him. I don't think a lot of SEC teams have a guy that could guard him, but a kid like that's versatile, like that. You know, he's 6'7", and McLaughlin's 6'7", but that's like giving McLaughlin a skill of taking it to the rack and consistently scoring. I mean, you know, I think that's probably the next step, getting a 6'7" forward, but who can also shoot it, stretch the floor, and score a little bit more consistently, is what I would say. Let's see here. Kentucky is from B. Sheridan 15. Kentucky and Alabama both play similar styles of basketball after what happened last night. What adjustments does Byington need to make in order to bounce back at home on Saturday, Luke?
Well, I think, again, if you look at the game in 2 halves, which I always do, the first half, you know, we're down, 17 at half. We missed so many shots around the basket. We can't.
4 for 26 on the game.
You do that, you give yourself no shot, because you're not going to come back from 17 down at Tuscaloosa with what we have to do offensively and defensively. You're not going to come. Now, second half, both teams were good offensively. I think we outscored them by a point or 2. So it was because we were more efficient offensively in the second half. We have to put 2 halves like that together to beat Kentucky.
Let's see here. Here's a football question. Vandy Guy 96. What football game is key next year for building on this season and winning more than just 6 or 7 games?
I don't know. Obviously, you need to win your non-conference games and win all 4 of them. You can't have another Georgia State or Utah State beat you. I think that's where you start, is you win all 4 non-conference games. Now, winning at Blacksburg is not easy. Virginia Tech's a tough place to play. I'm not sure how they're doing in the portal, what their expectations are. I know Coach Marv has moved along, and they've lost several players, including their quarterback. So I don't know about that game. It's kind of a wild card, but definitely I think you got to win all your non-conference games.
At South Carolina is the first SEC game, Saturday, September 13th. You go back to last year. Was Alabama the first SEC game, Luke, last year?
No, I don't think so. I think it was our first home game, maybe. Didn't we start on the road? I don't know. I'm saying that, but I'm not sure.
Hold on, let me look that up real quick, because I say that because, I think this offense and this team in general will be better early in seasons. Okay, at Missouri was the first SEC game. But Alabama, you had a bye before Alabama, and that was still just the second SEC team you played. So you had film against an SEC team, but, not a whole lot, and that was early in the season. And I wonder if this team early in a season, is it better they catch, that's at Williams-Brice, and South Carolina is probably going to be a preseason top 10 team. And that's going to be tough. But man, the schedule, it's hard looking at this schedule. At Alabama, and then LSU at home, Missouri at home. Yeah, I mean, you get Auburn at home. I'm with you, Luke. That at Virginia Tech, I think I would answer that person's question maybe by saying at Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Losing Drones and your defensive coordinator, they made a lot of changes. Kind of seems like they're getting somewhat desperate there. Brett Pry, I think, is a good coach, but season kind of spiraled on them. And, I mean, you could argue Vanderbilt's a better team than Virginia Tech, but still, you're on the road, and that's not going to be easy. I don't know. It's hard to say just one game, but you're absolutely right. Utah State, I told this to Chris a week or so ago. Utah State still scares me. But I wonder, and Luke, I wonder, I know it's not even close to football season, but are we past that this year? I wonder if, and we'll get past that in this build. Will we be past that this year where fans don't have to worry about a sneaky game like a Utah State team like that?
Well, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news on that. I don't know that you'll ever get past that. And I'll give you a perfect example. The team that just played for the national championship lost to Northern Illinois. So anybody beat you. If you're not ready to play, anybody can beat you. I think I compare Utah State to a UNLV of a couple of years ago. They're, same type of team. They're going to score some points. They're going to play really hard. They're excited about playing. A lot of people don't look at, well, they're playing Vanderbilt. Well, Utah State looks at playing Vanderbilt as that's an SEC team. We can beat an SEC team. So you're going to get their best, their very best. And if you take a day off, you'll get popped. We proved Georgia State.
Okay, I think that's all the mailbag questions, Luke. We've got some in the chat right now. I'm going to rumble through real quick. By the way, Elliot says, great to see Luke. Glad he's better.
Thank you.
Charles, can you talk about Coach Byington's play calling? Watching on TV, it looks like he directs movement and Vandy runs a flow offense. Do they run or draw up plays besides timeouts? It really doesn't seem like it. I mean, that, and that's kind of your modern approach, Luke, but it does look like Byington is directing a ton of that movement. And, you haven't seen that at Vanderbilt a while, and, because Stackhouse was there for the last 5 years, but it's a different offensive style for sure.
Well, I went to the tournament in Charleston, and I watched him. We sat right behind the bench, 2 or 3 rows up, and I watched him intently because that time I knew I'd met Coach Byington, but I didn't know exactly what to expect of how he'd coach on game days. And he is constantly, if a kid, like for instance, last night when Nickel hit 2 in a row, he ran motion to get him the ball to hopefully get him opening and get, make sure the kids say, look, we're going to keep going until this kid cools off. I think he's big on that. Devin was shooting the ball good last night. I remember him running a play to get the ball to Devin for a 3, and he hit it. So I do think he does that, but otherwise it's just that motion and make the right pass, make the right decision, and be strong with the ball. It's not real complicated what he does.
I think that is it from the chat. We got one more from Clay. Luke, from your experience inside the athletic department, what would you be doing after all the positive momentum from football and basketball going into next year?
Well, two things. And if you give me a little time here, Billy, I want to talk about it in two separate ways. Talk about it in football and in basketball. In football, first of all, what they've done with the students, they need to permanently, I forget which game it was, that they added more students, allowed more students in. I'm not sure how they did it, but anyway, let's just say, and I don't know the number, but let's say there's 4,000 student seats. They need to open it up to every student that wants to go can get in, and there's not a problem. Whether you have another 500 seats that sit empty, if they don't show, whatever it may be, Vanderbilt needs to eat that. And just to get more Vanderbilt fans in the stands and get students in the stands. That's the first thing you need to do in football. In basketball, I think it's time, because of the climate with the Predators, the Titans, and Vanderbilt basketball not being the only game in town, that the 2 upper balconies, 3F and 3L of Memorial Gym, they're always wanting space for stuff. Close those 2 sections off. That would bring capacity down from 14.3 to about 12.8 or something like that. That's less visiting team fans that'll be in the game, because that's who sits in those seats when they're not subbed. It's either empty or the visiting team uses them. So block that off, utilize that for office space or whatever you need to use it for, Olympic sports, whatever it may be. Make the gym smaller, because I don't think, even if Vanderbilt goes to a Final Four, that you're going to have on a consistent basis 14,000 Vanderbilt fans. I don't. So those seats are visiting team fans, or they sit empty.
I don't hate that. I mean, I think that, why not? I mean, that's a pretty good point there. As you look at the momentum they have right now, obviously Saturday should be another big day for basketball in terms of the crowd. Could get the fine up to 500,000 if the students storm again. But Luke, that's all the questions. If you got anything to wrap us up here, go ahead. But like I said, could be another big weekend at Memorial.
That's just good to be back. Sorry Chris couldn't be with us today, but I do want to say this about you guys. I've followed you guys while I've been sick. I've watched a lot of your content, and you guys are doing a fabulous job, all of you. Brandon, yourself, Joey, Elena, everyone, and keep up the good work.
Appreciate it, Luke. It's good to have you back, and obviously good to be back here with the roundtable. Hopefully we'll get Chris back in the fold next week, but appreciate everybody for listening. Give us a review, 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. Subscribe to the channel, like this show, hit that like button as well. If you're interested in sponsoring a show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy 247 podcast.